Should we start or are we waiting?
Yeah, we'll start.
Okay. Is everyone there or?
Subbi, kindly make Lalita ma'am as a co-host. Subbi.
Yeah. Just give us a minute. We'll get started. Ma'am
Sure.
has
Absolutely.
technical trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think she may need to connect to our audio.
Good evening, respected Dr. Ashish, Mr. Ramanaidu, Mr. Subramaniam, and all dear parents and students who are present here today. Very glad to be a part of this wonderful webinar. And we are so happy and so proud that we got Dr. Ashish, who is a passionate educationist and who is a storyteller. And he's talking about fluid intelligence, which is something very new. But it will definitely give all of us wonderful insights into what it's all about. We welcome you, Dr. Ashish, and we are so glad and so happy that you could be a part of this. And we also welcome Mr. Ramanaidu, our chairman, who is a learner, lifelong learner, and a very passionate educationist. And I must tell you that he has a wonderful vision. Those who are associated with him. It is very infectious and it gets rubbed on very well. His enthusiasm and his penchant for quality definitely puts us all on a different plane. We also have with us our tech whiz, a man with tremendous patience, Mr. Subramaniam, our executive director, and without whose technical assistance these webinars are really not possible. Dear parents, before I hand over the proceedings to Mr. Ramanaidu, I would just like to brief you a little. Now, what is fluid intelligence? It's the capacity to think logically and solve problems in new and novel situations. Right now, we're also in a new and novel situations where each one of us are trying our best to bring new normalcy into our lives. So in times like this, we definitely need to think novelly, differently, and work towards that. Okay, and this fluid intelligence helps us to solve and think independently and also, acquire knowledge, which is quite different from what we normally do. Now, this will also help us to identify patterns and relationships and to extrapolate these findings using logic. So, we are really looking forward, sir, to this wonderful fluid intelligence. And we know that that's a very crucial factor in every child's cognitive development so that the child develops and learns to interact and experiment within the in which he or she is. So we look forward to hearing more from you, sir. And now I hand over to our chairman, Mr. Ramanaidu, to take these proceedings forward. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Lalita ma'am. Good evening, today's speaker, Dr. Ashish, my dear parents, teachers, and students. A warm welcome to Rockwoods International School Parents Cognate webinar series. Today, we have the most influential and creative speaker. He would guide us how to involve our students in fluid thinking with day in, day out activities and enhance our children's possibilities of exploring new ways or innovative ways. Dr. Ashish had great experience giving ideas to the parents and also cultivating these habits in the children. Before hand over to Ashish, I would like to quote or cite an example related to London cab drivers. Then I'll hand over to Ashish. Neuroscientists found that the brain of London scientists is almost 10-20% larger than their peers who are pursuing other profession, even larger than the common people are some of the scientists. Then they really research and try to analyze the brains of London drivers, and they took MRI and CT scans of their London cab taxi drivers and analyzed that their hippocampus is almost 10-20% extra, and the drivers who had been longer time, their hippocampus even is larger extra. They found very interesting facts about this. Since London is a city built over centuries of time, it is not built with urban designed grid. So these drivers, to get a license of cab driving, they need to really have understanding of almost 25,000 streets, and they should able to analyze the most efficient way of traveling between 2 points. So this test made them to become more spatial thinkers and creative people and analyze the data spontaneously. Hence, so the brain started expanding. They had become more of spontaneous decision makers, solve the problems and the spur of the moment to take care of their job and duty. So this example shows that when you really think and also try to follow some patterns and try to solve the new problems, understand new culture, interact with new people, try to enhance your new possibilities, this will help all of us think beyond the box rather than just trying to collect few facts, few data. Now world is filled with enough knowledge, enough data. World is looking for new thinkers, creative people, innovative people. Someone can think beyond the box, give the solutions to a world, right? So in this trying times, hard times, we should inculcate these kind of habits. Since we all stuck into homes, this is the time you as a parent and a student can try to understand these difficulties and analyze different situations to enhance your children's abilities to enhance their fluid thinking rather than allowing them to just follow crystallized ways of by hearting few data and facts. So I'm really curious about Dr. Ashish's talk. Even I would like to learn and implement these strategies in our schools also with my children. I encourage and invite all the parents, seek out new challenges, encourage your children to interact with new people, explore new places, take them to new nature places and also new countries, wherever it is possible. When the child sees new things, his brain will start interacting and try to understand its nature, so that he will become more of a fluid thinker rather than a crystallized thinker. With this, I would hand over to Dr. Ashish to enlighten all of us how to inculcate these habits of fluid thinking. Hence, the great minds learn, innovate, and create best world. All of us become independent thinkers, and the children will see great future ahead, or gorgeous future ahead. Thank you. Hand over to Dr. Ashish.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Naidu. That was a lovely introduction. And I have to say that, you have a pretty decent grasp on what fluid thinking is. And I also have to thank Lalitha ma'am for such wonderful introduction and your views on fluid intelligence and fluid thinking. So I welcome everyone who's listening, parents, students, school leaders and teachers, and especially the younger ones, the children. And I hope that I keep this session simple and funny, so that it doesn't get boring, and we learn this concept in a fun manner. So the idea is that I do not want to give complex narrative for what exactly it is. My desire will be that I leave you with two concepts or three sentences which you carry for the rest of your life, and then they stay with you, and rather than ranting something which you probably consider boring. So I want to start with a little sort of a display, which is these two containers, if you can see. So I'm holding a glass with water, and there is this kettle. Now, what I do is that I pour water into this kettle. Now, what you see is that there are two things which we have to pay our attention to. One is what is there inside the container, and the other one is the container. Now, if we remember these two words for the rest of our lives, I think that this would be very profound for us and our learning styles and our learning patterns. Content and container. Now, our brain is the container, and what goes inside the water is the subjects we study. Whether we are becoming scientists, artists, doctors, engineers, actors, cricketers, the water is the subject. But what you see here is that the subject changes its shape with the container. That is our mind. Now, it is the ability of our mind which works on the content or the subject, which makes the difference, or which makes it magical. Now, when we take a pause here and reflect over the kind of books we study, or if we look at our entire learning journeys, whether we are a child or an adult, and we think that how many times we read or expose ourselves to books which improve the content, and how many times we read books and material which improves the container. And then we will realize that what is the biggest flaw of our educational journey, or what distinguishes between great minds and regular minds. Because it is the ability of the container which decides your grit, your creativity, your innovation, how you handle failure, how you handle success, how you rationalize, how you process a thought. Because if there are two pieces of fact, one piece of fact going through one container and another piece of fact going through another container. It is the container which is going to decide what eventually happens with that fact. So that is one of the limitations in our educational journey right now, is that we focus a lot on our subjects and not focus on improving the strength of our container and how the container gets improved. There are a lot of books which improve our containers, which will make it stronger, which will help to deconstruct reality, to understand, to process. And that's what the great minds do, that they start improving the strength of the container by exposing themselves to various kinds of reading, whether it is philosophy, whether it is logic, whether it is, as Mr. Naidu said, that, the faculty of the brain, if you identify pattern and distinguish it. How do you do that? So fluid thinking is one of the tools or approaches which great minds adopt in order to improve the container. So that's the first thing I want to leave you with, that you have to distinguish between the content and the container. Because in the future, the change of circumstances, the adaptability which is going to be required is going to be dependent on the ability of the container. And hence it becomes very important, especially in today's time, that we do not start narrowing ourselves only to the subjects which we think that are going to make us experts or specialists in the future. Because if we keep focusing ourselves, narrowing ourselves to these subjects, we may end up becoming redundant in the times which are going to come in future. The times of artificial intelligence, or the times which will require you to change and adapt. So that's the first thought which I want to leave you with, that in your life, you have to start looking for sources and books which improve your container. Because even if you look at, I have been talking about fluid thinking for past 2 years, but if you look at today's time, the pandemic, it is our ability of our container which helps us how we process this situation, the situation which is testing us. Now, this eventually will become a function of how strong our container is. So, the container is not only going to help us in how we become a better professional, but also how we become a better human being. So this is the first visual I want to leave you with, the content and the container visual. Now, the second thing before we start on fluid thinking, I want to just show you something and ask you about how do you define it? Now, if I show you this and ask you that this is an iPhone, and ask you that how do you define it? Do you consider it a piece of art? Do you consider a piece of technology? Or you consider it a piece of entrepreneurship? If I ask you this question and ask you to reflect and ask you that, how would you then define Steve Jobs? As an artist, as a techie, or as an entrepreneur? And if you are able to reflect on this question, you may start reaching to the concept of what is a fluid mind and what fluid mind eventually does. The iPhone, incidentally, shows us one of the fluid minds out of many. And it tells us that Steve Jobs was able to design this iPhone by breaking the subject boundaries and by considering that we have to intermingle the subjects, and arts and science and entrepreneurship or any other ability, they go hand in hand. When you break the subject boxes and go beyond your subjects and start interacting to the world in an integrated manner, that is the first step of fluid thinking. An iPhone visual definitely tells us, because what happens is that whenever we talk about our careers in school, we generally talk about careers as a static event. For example, I want to become a doctor, or I want to become an engineer, or I want to become a businessman. Now, these labels are static, but every adult would tell that in their lives, careers are a continuum. You have to many a times change your career. You have to many times face different opportunities, face different challenges, encounter different opportunities. You have to scale up your skills, and you have to do many things in your life, in your career, which actually points to this fact that it is not a label or a static event like I want to become a doctor. Because what it does is that what you eventually do is that you start narrowing yourself to the subjects which you think will make you a doctor. So, for example, physics, chemistry, biology becomes your focus, whereas career requires you to face so many different circumstances, and so many different opportunities are going to knock on your door. And because of the rise in technology and change in the progress of civilization, you're going to require to adopt and change and interact with other subjects and improve your skills, that you may eventually not remain relevant in your field by just focusing on the subjects which you're right now focusing on. So this is a very important insight to understand, to think that careers are not a static event. So whenever you see great minds, you would realize that they prepare themselves. So here I want to make an important observation, is that if you are uncertain or if your child is uncertain, that is not a bad thing. If your child is uncertain about his career goals or her career goals, then it may also be a sign that they want to interact with various fields and they want to grab knowledge from all the other spheres of life. And this may be an indication that your brain is thinking not in that linear fashion, but in the terms of the fluid fashion, which requires you to arrive at groundbreaking products or innovations. And that is not a bad sign. Sometimes we think that we are failing and we are not certain about our career goals. We are actually limited. But that may also be a sign that you are actually a mind which wants to grasp from various disciplines. And this is a tendency which is very much relevant in the minds of these innovators or Nobel laureates or scientists. And here I would want to show you a little video, which is just a 1-minute video, which tells you how fluid thinking works. Just a second.
All those experiences made me who I am. The diversity of background that I have, which runs the gamut from studying Russian literature to aerospace engineering and chemical engineering. I speak a number of languages. I've been interested in many things over my lifetime. I didn't actually become a professor of chemical engineering until I was 30 years old. I was doing many other things before that, including being a taxi driver. All those experiences, even if they were not the most positive experiences, made me who I am. And I think the diversity of experience makes me very different from everybody else.
So the person you were hearing right now, it was Frances Arnold, who's a Nobel laureate and in chemistry. So when we hear her, we realize, generally when we are in our school times and when we think of experts or specialists, we think that they would only be focusing on if for example, if they are studying chemistry, they would only be focused on chemistry and trying to kind of not look at any other field, or they would live a very boring kind of a life. So this is a slight misconception about how we learn, because even the greatest of experts, the greatest of specialists, like those who eventually win Nobel Prizes, carry the fluid mind. So in your school, if you are thinking that I'm just going to narrow myself into my field and that's going to make me a specialist in my field, that may not be the right strategy. The right strategy will be to develop the fluid ability in you and eventually become what I term as a fluid specialist. So a fluid specialist is very different from a narrow specialist, a static specialist. And that's why I think that all the children who think that they are uncertain in their mind or who want to study other subjects or who want to also, participate in dancing or singing or extracurricular activities or travel or expose themselves to various experiences, that eventually is going to help you to become a specialist and an enriched human being. And that is a very important learning if we look at most of the big innovators, that it is because of their diverse experiences they eventually became higher up in their career journey. If we keep on narrowing ourselves in a manner where we are absolutely static and absolutely unidimensional, then we may rise up to a level, but beyond that, we may find ourselves limited. And life is a very long journey. It takes you through so many dimensions that right now, if you feel a pressure on your head that, oh my God, I have not cleared this examination or that examination, it is a very small component of your entire life. And your exposure and experience is eventually going to help you. So it is not about clearing of an event or, being successful in one event by following a crystallized path, but it is about developing those diverse understanding of the world to become a better human being, a better professional. And this is exactly what I do. I mean, I have kind of looked at various minds and explained how they work in my book, Fluid, and try to make the readers understand that in the coming future, which will require us to remain adaptable and require us to interact with newer skills every second year, we may require to upgrade ourselves. We, one, require to work on our container, and second, we have to adapt fluid thinking, which uh, it starts with us not narrowing in our field. For example, Venki Ramakrishnan, another Nobel laureate, he says that now the trend is very dangerous, that we have started narrowing ourselves down even earlier. Like, even when we are in our 6th standard or 7th standard or 8th standard, we start thinking that, here is an entrance exam I have to clear. And I do not require, what literature is going to do, like what we were hearing Frances Arnold, that, her understanding of Russian literature. And she's very proud of that, even though she's a professor of chemistry. So, if we start narrowing down earlier, we may eventually develop a mind which is not fluid. So that is something which I want to leave you with to start with, that, the container and content difference, and your uncertainty is not a bad thing. Career is not a static event. Career is a continuum which requires we may even require to change career, or even within your career you will face bringing up new projects or new skills or new ventures, and it may require various skill sets. So fluid thinking is the way forward, as I researched and identified in my book. And that's the thought I want to leave you with. And I think that we can discuss more about it when we take question and answers. So I think this is what I would like to kind of, take a pause here and then kind of continue the discussion in terms of how these great minds follow the pattern and fluid wheel. And I've come out with a model of how do we do it with fluid wheel, so we can discuss about that a little later. Yes, Mr. Naidu.
Hi.
Yeah.
So maybe
I'm just waiting for parents to ask any questions to type in.
Right, right. So here I can, before like there is a important insight I want to add, is that, when I was talking about the content and the container, now, when we apply to some of the Ivy Leagues and Oxbridge and, Oxford, Cambridge and great universities, sometimes we wonder that, we are scoring, perfect scores, but still we are not getting through it. One reason could be obviously the competition is higher and its probability, but one of the reasons, key reasons also, is that even these universities are looking to know how you have worked upon your container. So the test is also not of how much you know, but it is also about what you do with what you know, and also maybe about what you do with what you don't know. So, your statement of purposes, your essays. So, university is not kind of asking you to show that you are almost as knowledgeable as a Nobel laureate. The university wants to see that, how you process knowledge, how you are understanding life, how you are able to channelize your knowledge into a direction which eventually may give you an innovative, groundbreaking product or a solution or contribution to the world. So this is also very important in terms of the application. So I just thought that maybe it may be of some help or to the children who are aiming to go outside and apply for these universities, because sometimes we generally keep our focuses on the subject and scoring higher marks in SATs and all that. But sometimes we are less focused on how the university is also reading that what we are doing with our lives and with this knowledge, which is a outcome of how strong is our container. Can I
Yes, I think Ms. Rashish, I think there are a couple of very good questions that have come up.
Okay.
It would be great if you can try answering those. The first question is, I think it is coming from one of the parent. He says, I have a simple question or maybe a clarification. It is said that discipline leads to routine life, and routine life becomes hurdle in innovation and creativity. What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's a it's a paradox, but so is life, and we have to negotiate between the concept which is discipline and the concept which is being a free spirited and free minded person. So it's a paradox, and we need to develop the ability of how we negotiate these two, because we simply cannot say that discipline is would lead to routine or dull life, and we also simply cannot say that free spirited life would eventually lead to innovations. So I because it's a big challenge, and this challenge is also translated in terms of being a specialist and a generalist. Now, a lot of people say that you may read a lot of articles right now that people are saying that we should become generalists and specialist era is over, and our children should know multiple skills, and one focal area is not right. I am not saying that in fluid thinking. That's a very wrong interpretation of understanding fluidity, where somebody understands it as that you want to become a jack of all trade. No, not at all. This fluidity I've explained by creating a diagram, which is based on our spinning wheel or charkha. Now in charkha, if you see, there are spokes around and there is a fulcrum in the middle. Now that fulcrum is your focus, is your focal area, and your spikes are your different disciplines from which you bring the knowledge towards your focal area. So for example, while you are focusing on that particular project or that particular mission or that particular idea, you are absolutely focused, but at the same time, and disciplined, of course, but at the same time, you're bringing your diverse knowledge and directing it towards that focal area. So obviously, in the end, the discipline is what is going to lead you to become either a cricketer or an actor or a scientist. But what kind of eventual expert you become is going to be governed by the spokes you bring into the table. So discipline and free spirit are they are in paradox, but they it's a balance which is required between these two, and one needs to also understand that sometimes we get too extreme in terms of our discipline and sometimes lose a sight of free mind, and sometimes we get too free spirited, losing the sight of discipline, and that is the nature of life.
Wonderful,
Very much.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And the second question that we have is, in what direction a person who is in a saturation position, who is in a comfortable, comfortable zone, should think, and how he can take it forward? This question is from one of the teacher.
So saturation in terms of the knowledge or in terms of the comforts of life? I mean,
comforts of life, and even at the workplace, it's become pretty routine, and in that situation, how should they think of?
So I think that obviously this is a challenging question, and I think that it would require a very sincere answer, because it is a choice of individual, but it is also at the same time, like for example, if I look at my career, I have kind of devised, because this was a very important aspect for me, that I live a life where I am encountering new challenges, but it comes with its own style of functioning, and you have to carve many new paths, and that some people may find it challenging, some people may find it exciting. So depending on your framework, it eventually will govern whether you want to have a life which is full of challenges every day. If you think that you are feeling bogged down by monotony, or you think that you're saturated, now if it is so for example, if it's a saturation of a comfort zone, I think probably I feel so that life is pretty challenging, and it doesn't let you remain in that comfort zone for a very long time. And especially in future, if somebody thinks that I'm in a comfort zone, I don't know, like I feel that that's a very safe position to take. I mean, in terms of, and life is not that safe. So continuous improvement in terms of at least understanding of life. For example, if I think that I'm absolutely happy with spending my time in a small village with organic farming, it is a wise and pretty evolved thought. And it could, to some people, it may sound as a saturated thought or as a monotonous thought. But for some people, it may be almost godly to wake up every day and spend time with their plants and trees and do organic farming. So I think it is also, a very individualistic way of looking at things, that what you consider monotony and what you consider as keeping your soul beautiful every day. So I think that's how I would answer that.
Thank you very much. One other question. This is from one of the child. If a person has a strong desire of becoming something, I think he's quoting an example. If a person wanted to become a doctor, if he is not going to work, very clearly on physics, chemistry, bio, as you have quoted in your example, he may get distracted from his goal and he may not achieve what he wanted to become. I think a part of it you have already answered, but I think to very specific to this question.
It's a very important question, and I would not want to give any wrong signals here. See, I would definitely respect. See, one, we have to understand that exams and the way we are being kind of assessed to reach to our goal, there is some degree of unfortunate assessment there. I do not completely agree with it, where we have to kind of, so the way we choose doctors and make them sit the 12th standards in an exam, and then an exam decides who can be a doctor, who can be an exceptional surgeon or not eventually. That exam may not be that fair. So, but we have to consider that, right? Because those are practical questions that obviously that exam requires us to narrow down on these subjects. And that's why the whole factory of coaching classes and all those things have emerged. But what we have to understand here is what I'm trying to say is that even if you look from the perspective of fluid wheel, what I'm asking you is that if your goal at that particular point of time becomes being a doctor, and then at that time in that journey you want that I want to clear that exam and it is very important for me, then you try to bring that in the center of your fulcrum and then plan your entire life around it in a manner for that particular time. Because if that is what it takes to become a doctor at that particular time. But what I'm saying is that you have to at the same time be very well aware that if you keep on narrowing in that sense throughout your life and not worry about the spokes around you, then eventually you'll only be left with the fulcrum and not any diversity around it. For example, that you also have to think that you are a component of the system and not the system yourself. So you as a doctor and your ability to become a good doctor and what a good doctor eventually means to the society. And for example, I have given a fluid wheel of a doctor, that what a eventual cardiologist, a fluid cardiologist would look like. And in that I say that he would also be aware of the prices of the stent and the improvement in artificial intelligence and auto surgeries and all that. So it keeps on asking you to collect various pieces of knowledge at various journey of your life. So I think that that fluid wheel, if you have in your mind, then it becomes a very important tool to assess yourself, that whether I am a narrow doctor or a fluid doctor. But eventually you are a doctor. I'm not saying that if you will not narrow down, you will eventually become, because at particular point. So it's a very fine balance which you require. And that's why I don't use the term generalist. I use the term fluid specialist, because specialist is attached to fluidity. And that's why I give the example of the wheel, that that wheel is very important for us to develop. Now comes the question of that, in during the school time, if we will not focus on physics, chemistry, biology, we may not clear that entrance. Now, it's a very difficult question, and I can answer it through my personal experience that I did not. And I had multiple experiences in my school life, and which took me beyond my subject. And probably, that's the reason why I'm not a doctor. So, a medical doctor, which I probably, would have become. But in the hindsight, if I look at my life, I feel that, uh, that enrichment, if that costed me my degree, probably, that's what I was fated to, that, I could not sacrifice that enriched understanding. And if I had more understanding of it at that time, I would have developed the ability to narrow down and diverse at the same time. If that was what I'm pointing at, is that developing, narrowing at the same time, and then opening up that fluid circle whenever you require. So probably that is what I'm driving at. And because that challenge will appear to you at every juncture of your life, and it would be at school and then college and then later on, where you just feel that my life is then now just limited to these four walls. And if you're happy with that, and if you think that that's the purpose of your life, and you think that that is what is going to bring pleasure to you, probably yes. But you at least are aware, by having a fluid wheel, you're aware of your options.
Thank you very much. One more question. Does the fluid thinking and crystallized intelligence decline with age? How can I increase, my brain to be still 100%?
Yeah. In fact, I feel that fluid thinking, in fact, will improve with age, and you will have more options and less of the world's pressure. Because what happens initially is that we are bound by the societal pressures and the societal definitions of success. And we ourselves are very uncomfortable if our children, they take a slightly detour, because we sometimes feel that we are answerable to our peers or society. Oh, what will my friends say if my child has failed in this his endeavor? So initially, the pressure on a soul is a lot, because you have to perform to certain yardsticks, and you may not develop or get the chance to develop those fluid the elements in your understanding. But as you grow, and you develop a model where you are free and independent, and you are able to kind of keep moving. I think I mean, I also wrote one of the study papers where I mentioned that um, many great discoverers or inventors or innovators have been successful after 40 years of age. Like the average age of a successful startup founder, there was a study, was 42.5. So which gives us an indication that right now the narrative is that a 16-year-old should have a startup company, or an 18-year-old should be successful, or a 20 under 20 list, or a 30 under 30 list. And so there is this pushed by media sentiment that a child who is not under 20 under 20 is of no use, which is absolutely rubbish way of looking at things. Because if we look at this study, which is like that 42.5 as the median age, it is an important reflection on that. As we get time and we understand and assess and try to come out with inventions and long-term inventions, and something which is long lasting, it takes time. I mean, you have to segregate between exceptionals and people who have regular life. I mean, some people may arrive at an exceptional talent at a very early age. But even then, I have to tell you that, let's assume that you become a cricketer at the age of 16, but that doesn't mean that you would not require to live a very fulfilling life after 40. Of course, when you will retire, your ability or your fluid thinking is going to come and help you that what you do after that. So your life doesn't end after becoming a cricketer. If you are talented and you think that I don't require to learn anything else in life. No, it's not like that. It hasn't happened. If you look at all the examples of the past talented people, people who have maneuvered their careers are not someone who have only remained static in that. Otherwise, world would forget you, and you would not even be able to negotiate the world after 40 once you retire. Because obviously your life doesn't end at 30 or 32. Your life starts after that. So I think that that's a important thing to keep in mind.
Thank you very much. Lalita ma'am, how much more time we have? I think there are plenty of questions coming in.
Yes, sir. We have another 10 minutes, sir. 11 minutes actually, precisely.
Can we take one or two more questions?
No, Subi, let us take all the questions. I think we have 5 more questions.
Yes.
They
Yes,
are very good questions. So
Yeah.
Even I have, Subi sir, I have a question to it after that.
Yes,
Oh my
sure.
God.
Yes. Thank you.
There are a couple of questions. I thought maybe they are related. The first one is, in a way, content is part of the container, is what I think one of the participant is saying. Is it right? And the second part of the question is, I think this is from different participant though, how to develop a fluid container and process the content. We live in an era of free information and knowledge. We reach nowhere if we take interest in everything. What is your view on that, sir? That was the second part of the question.
See, first, if we look at the content and container visual, obviously, whenever we come up, like for example, this metaphor, or this is not, a research-based neuro concept, right? It's a concept which is devised to understand our learning style. So we have to understand that it's a visual which helps us to understand how our mind and subjects function. Now, obviously, the content are affecting the container is affecting the content, obviously. it's a two-way process. Nobody can detach them. And the more you are going to process it, the more your mind's ability. Obviously, some people may be born with a evolved or a sophisticated container, but obviously the content molds the container and the container molds the content. What I was uh, why I focus on the container is that there is too much focus on the content and container gets ignored. And that's why there are so like if there are two educationists, somebody will also have to talk about the container. So I talk about container. My entire work is in the direction of the container. And I think that, obviously content would definitely affect the container and vice versa. And the how we develop it, before answering that, in this time of free knowledge, how do we develop this? For example, in IB there is a very interesting book called The Theory of Knowledge. Now, a book like Theory of Knowledge is going to help you to develop the container. Obviously it's going to help give you some content also, but you can't obviously detach them completely, but it is going to help your container. So the books, for example, Fluid Thinking, the book which I have wrote, it's a book which is primarily aimed to improve the container, but obviously it has a lot of content related to, like, for example, I have given example of CV Raman, and in my school life, or I have never come across any reference in any curriculum where CV Raman is shown to decipher the qualities of the musical instrument mridanga. I have never read it. I never read it before writing this book. So it was a very interesting piece of information for me, where I have given a deconstruct of how C.V. Raman has published a very exceptional research paper on the qualities of the mridanga musical instrument in nature, which is a content, but it tells us that how C.V. Raman. So my reason for me to give it in the book is to the reader to understand that how diversity or how diverse the mind of C.V. Raman was. But at the same time, I obviously also give you some content on how the physics or the mechanics of mridanga works. So that's what my take is, that you need to keep collecting those instruments. Like when we talk to our parents, sometimes parents give us those advices which are important for our mind's formation. Meditation, for that matter, is an important container too. When we delve with philosophy, when we look at readings of people like Plato and Aristotle, or other philosophers, or the people during the time of Renaissance, all these books would eventually push you in the direction of improving your container. And I think that when you look at philosophers or educators, or even from our world, J. Krishnamurti, and they when they talk about it, is about the ability of the container. So I think it is about how we expose, apart from reading our subject, obviously, which we do. We need to keep on collecting and reading such books and introduce them into the curriculum, which eventually helps us to process and assess the information or situation. Like, for example, this pandemic, it is obviously we can collect a lot of content from the market, and the graphs and everything, but eventually how we process it, whether it is the happiness or the sanity, or the value of these months, it will eventually be this container's capability. Now the question of that, in the time of this free knowledge, if we keep on collecting information, and how will we then have an expertise? So this is precisely what I handle in my book, that this fear of that, either it is collecting everything and collecting nothing. The balance is somewhere in the middle, and the balance is very much required. You are not I mean, that's a theory and backed by examples in the book and extensive research, and it can be wrong any day, of course, because fluid intelligence or crystallized intelligence as a concept, any concept in terms of pedagogy can be challenged, should be challenged, and it is only as good as the evidence which you put behind it. So the evidence which I quote, where I give examples of various case studies of these minds, I say that they are able to maintain the balance, and they were definitely, like as we heard about Frances Arnold, that the video which I showed you, uh, she isn't in my book, but I got to know about her later, and in fact I wrote to her, and she very sweetly answered me back, and I understand that her diversity is very crucial for her becoming what she is in the end, as she herself says in her video. So it is very important that it is not all collecting everything what you come across, and or collecting nothing what you come across. It's a balance, and in that balance you have to create a fluid wheel, and I keep on stressing upon the fluid wheel idea, that it is about the spikes and the fulcrum. The fulcrum becomes what you collect, what you are collecting for. So you're not just collecting for, I mean, you can initially start with a blank slate and keep on collecting, but eventually the fulcrum becomes an important point. And that's why, obviously, I mean, you don't have to you have to have a fulcrum in the end to kind of show your capabilities. Every child has to have a fulcrum. Uh, but in these times, what I am saying is the fulcrum cannot be a static career, cannot be like a static label. Even if medicine is your fulcrum, you may have to put different labels to it as you move along in your journey. It could be you may become a better surgeon or a different surgeon. Initially, it was MBBS, then MS, then MCH, and then some kind of association with a hospital, and then later on something else. And so that is what the fulcrum does. That it keeps you in the focal space.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rita ma'am, would you like to go ahead with your question, or there are
Yes, I will like to ask this question. Dr. Jaiswal, I would like to ask this question. Sir, what's the name of your book, sir? First and foremost, because we all need to
Yes.
procure one of that for ourselves.
Yeah, it's called Fluid. Very simply. It is
Very
called
nice.
Fluid. Yeah.
Fluid.
And
Sir,
there's a blue brain symbol on top, which signifies the ability of our mind to be fluid. Yeah.
Fantastic. Sir, I would like you to speak a few words to our educators, that is our teachers and parents, because largely what content goes into the container depends on these people. At least until the child gets the ability to do it himself or herself, we are always kind of putting boundaries on what they learn. So what's your take on that, and what's your advice to parents and teachers?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously this has been my area, and teacher training and learning about education in our department. I mean, our Department of Education at Oxford is known for developing learning strategies and teaching strategies and curriculum strategies. So what I feel is that uh, it is important for us to, as for any teacher, for example, like I think that uh, it is again a balance between your performance in the class as an actor and what you bring along with the performer. So this has remained in my mind from the early days of Oxford, that many teachers are generally working on being performers. When you say being performers, is that they would try to impress upon through doing things which make them popular. Some teachers, they keep on working on the the subject area, but their performance is weak, and that's why the classroom gets a bit boring. So could can someone survive just as a performer teacher? No. Can someone survive just as, I mean, a lot of teachers who are great teachers, I mean, like, I have to say, even in Oxford, they were like great professors, but I could not sit in their class for 5 minutes without, feeling that this is getting very boring, because, they are so much engrossed in their research areas, is that, when they are interacting with lesser minds like us, they just kind of, just go in, into the clouds, and it gets pretty boring for the recipient. So I think that, you every class, uh, as a performer and as a subject expert, the balance is that, and how much interest you take it. And here, obviously, there is a challenge of monotony, which has been expressed before, that teaching every day, and it's such a thankless job, that uh, teaching, and then and this lockdown has also told the world that how important teachers are, and parents would obviously understand that children at home, and teaching them, and is not an easy task. It is a tough ask, and assessing them, and measuring them on learning goals and everything is not an easy task. So I think that we generally, sometimes the media has kind of again been very unkind, in terms of that the schools are redundant, or the teachers are redundant, now everything can be learned through computers or internet. No, it is a very superficial thing to say. And I think that we will be at loss by just thinking that children can learn from computers, and everything else should be shut down, because, and here also the homeschooling concept comes into picture. And I'm not a very big fan of homeschooling, I must say that, although this will open up a very new kind of a discussion area. But so for I think that it eventually is not a very thankful job, but at the same time you have to make it so exciting every day when you are in a classroom, and you can only do it by improving the performance and also improving the content. Like, as a teacher, what I do is that I would try to leave every, like, which gets very difficult, that with every session I want at least one thing original and taken, which can be taken by anyone. Like, here, for example, like, the content and the container thing is what I focused on, and I think that this may remain for the rest of the life. So I try to, when I prepare, I try to come up with something new whenever I'm sort of preparing a lecture. But it gets difficult in classrooms, I can totally understand that. And with parents, see, you know uh, like, for example, I have two daughters, and my sometimes people complain that I pay least attention to their studies, and more attention to their whether they're having fun or not, or whether they're enjoying life or not. Now, it is not that I am insincere in that sense, but I totally understand that as a parent, it is a very important requirement to understand that if I am capable enough to understand what is happening or going to happen in the future, then I can impose my learnings. But I have not come across anyone who could say with surety that in future this industry is going to rise up, or this profession is going to rise up. And when I push professions, or when I think that this profession is going to last in this manner, uh, I may have to kind of think twice. And the other thing is that eventually the crux of education or the learning is that we are not professional beings but human beings at the end of the day. So life is not work. Work is part of life, and life will
Exactly.
require your child to be a diverse, rich individual. And I think that is something which sometimes we try to control. Circumstances are out of our hands. So obviously we need to instill important, like, I try to instill the fundamentals and the foundations when it comes to, either brain or values of life. And I try to leave the micro to the child and try to kind of leave it to them, in terms of the freedom, whether it is a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. I would want to them to take charge of the micro curriculums. But when it comes to the bigger themes of learning, then obviously I pay attention. So paying attention to the bigger themes of learning, where the steering of the mind or the steering of the soul, I think that is something which, I mean, if ideally a parent should pay attention to, but when you get into the nitty gritty of it, or microing of it, then I don't know. I mean, I think that, that may help and may give better result initially, but, life is a very long journey. And I think that, it is important. And, also to the children that, parents most of the time are interested in your well-being, and their pressure is also sometimes a result of whether they have come from a very hard journeys in life, and they think that they've seen world as a very harsh place, so they would come up with, these stronger frameworks, because they would want you to not fall prey to the world, which is a harsh place. So it's like, if people understand that the intentions are right everywhere, it is just the method or the mechanism which may go wrong. And eventually, if someone is not performing, uh, I don't know. Like, I think that if you keep working on the mega themes of learning, eventually a person may come back only if you are, giving that kind of space to the child, rather than, putting that much pressure and expecting that the child is going to come back. So that's probably, again, debatable, but that's what I think.
Fantastic, sir. Fantastic. And I keep seeing the questions below, and I'm really thrilled to see some of them. Subi sir, I think you can ask those questions, sir.
Yes.
Say, Dr. Ashish,
Yes.
maybe there are a couple of questions. Maybe request you to speak about 1 minute for each question.
Absolutely.
So crisp and short, so that we answer most of the queries of the participants. They may feel a little happy to learn from you. But maybe I request you to be short and crisp.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think one question is, I think, what is a good example of fluid intelligence? I will also ask the following question. Maybe you can combine it and try telling, answering that question. The fluid thinking is somewhat opposite of focused thinking. And many students may not be able to cope with both simultaneously. What do you think is more important for students to opt for career? I know some of it you have covered it already, but I think they are very specific in asking what they wanted.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So, the examples of fluid intelligence, as I was giving, that, in my book, I have explained how fluid thinking exactly works. And as I was telling you, giving you the example of iPhone design, and in the there's an entire chapter dedicated to the iPhone design, that how Steve Jobs arrived at the iPhone design by adopting fluid thinking. So that's a very powerful example, and I've also given a TEDx talk on it. But in the book, I obviously explain step by step that how does it work. So that could be one of the examples. And then there are other examples. I've also given examples of Dr. Amartya Sen as an economist, that, how we think that he's just an economist, but eventually I've given a fluid wheel of Dr. Amartya Sen and explained what are the various spokes he bring to economics and developmental economics to become what he is eventually, and such a revered and highly respected economist. So I think that, there are a few other examples which I have given. So these could be two examples. One is Dr. Amartya Sen, and completely diverse field. And obviously Leonardo da Vinci is there, and Charles Darwin is there, and C.V. Raman is there in the book. And I mean, it's the subtitle is The Approach Applied by Geniuses Over Centuries. So I've tried to give examples from various centuries and various fields, so that it becomes a very robust theory. So that's first part. Now, second part is that, it is difficult anyways for children to have or the second was that focused thinking is opposite of fluid thinking. So I want to stress upon it again. I have already told that I do not say that jack of all trade is what fluid thinking is, and you are not focused when you are adopting, because all these names which I am taking, they are highly focused individuals. That is why they eventually emerged winners. Otherwise, they would not have. But here I want to kind of say this, that the term jack of all trade was first used for William Shakespeare, and for the way he was brought changes in the playwright. He brought this pheasant kind of a new kind of language to the whole writing, which wasn't taken very respectfully by the aristocrats, writers of those times. But that doesn't mean that he was a jack of all trade. He was a very focused, and he in fact broke the norm. So these individuals, it's not that they're not focused, but they carry a fluid wheel, which means that they focus on their particular project or writing or idea or dream at that particular time, but bring an learnings from various dimensions and create newer ground and break newer ground. And the newer ground is simply broken because of the diversity. So that is something which is important to understand, that fluid wheel is perhaps answer that question, that it is not focused thinking and fluid thinking, they do not stand against each other. Fluid thinking requires focused thinking as well as fluidity. Now the third question, which is that if the students do not have time to even focus on few subjects, how they are going to focus on various subjects. See, I understand it, but it is a journey which you craft for yourself, and for, if you're crafting for your child, for your child. Now these are two different parallel paths, where one, you say that I am going to prepare myself in a manner where my mind is static, I'm unadaptable, I want to focus, I want to achieve this, and that's why I want to kind of reject all the other what is there outside. um, that's a path, but we have to be careful about what it leads us to. And I would stand by people like Francis Arnold, people like Venki Ramakrishnan, who said that it is dangerous for children to narrow down on the subjects earlier, and it's a dangerous trend, and we have to keep exposing them to diverse knowledge, and reducing them to these certain narrowing and boxing of the subjects is dangerous. And I would completely agree with him. And I would say that before I stand on this thought, he gave it in 2009. And this is an important, piece of information as far as fluid thinking is concerned. So there are two parts, clearly two parts. One is where we say that doesn't matter, I want to define my life with event. My next event is an entrance exam. That entrance exam, if it is in the context of India, then I have to just strip out everything else, focus on this, and that's how I will lead my life. The second is where you say that life is, exam is an event is just an event, and I'm going to expose my child to classical music, to traveling, to other aspects of life, not at the cost of his life, because eventually childhood will also not come back again. So I mean, if you have a childhood where you have learned from life, exposed, done extra, otherwise in school we should strip out every subject and put them right from the beginning into these subjects which are right from the, why even study history and geography in the first? The smartness would be to make them study biology and from the year one, and not expose them to dance, music, dramatics, or debate, or elocution, or model UN, and so many other things. If that's the path we want to take, and I think that's a dangerous path, and we must understand that the coming age would require you to walk on this path. And this path also, for me, it seems fulfilling, because at the end it also serves the interest of you being a human being and not a professional being, because life at the end of the day is about experiences and enrichment. And I think that that is a very important, we can't deprive a child of that at the same time. And if it is, that's the choice, but one has to be aware of those choices. So that's how I can leave it with that. If you're aware, and if you're okay with this choice versus that, absolutely fine.
Fantastic, sir. Thank you.
Couple of more, sir. I will just try to combine them.
Okay.
I think you have pretty much answered this question. I will just read out the question. How can I equally control our thinking? To have fluid thinking and also focused thinking. So it was, I think, something which you have already answered. And the other question that we have is, see, how to balance the career that is useful for our bread and butter, and at the same time the thinking of infinity of mind, infinity for our desires to be an excellent. Because many times for common beginner human being, it takes almost 30 years to settle in India, right? What is your best way out based on your experience?
Yeah. See, and this question cannot be answered simply by me, and it is a question which each one of us would require to answer. That, we have to understand that eventually what is the purpose of our life. Eventually, when we say that bread and butter, and eventually we have created mechanisms where today, are we satisfied with the kind of life we have given to ourselves? So we also have to understand, this is a question which is a very difficult and a very profound question. It may require several years to answer. That if this is what we think that is the outcome of life, and I'm not commenting on any careers, I'm just saying that I feel concerned as an educationist that today, everywhere, if you see, whether it is our any kind of companies or hospitals or our businesses or our infrastructure, we definitely require a sea change, a transformation in that. Even our liberation of our society. So there are a lot many things which require us to improve, and that's why we see a lot of migration, lots of brain drain. And we sometimes feel that why this country is performing in that manner. Now we are eventually part of the system and creating the system. So do we have a society which is only focused on our self-interest, and that self-interest eventually is not going to serve you, if I can talk like that because eventually you're going to be part of the system, which if it fails, then nothing is going to save you. Like if you work towards safeguarding yourself and the system crumbles, then it is meaningless. The system has to improve at the same time, which will require individuals and children to serve the system to improve it, right? So children, if they will come up with groundbreaking ideas, new innovation, improve infrastructure, become doctors which are reliable, become lawyers which are reliable, or create a society which is can be trusted, then only you can expect an individual to kind of have a peaceful life. Because it's again a function of the people, and people is the society is a function of how people work, and people function how the society is. So I think that if we carry this thought, and okay, I can concede this point for someone who is absolutely poor, that you want to develop a career where you want to take advantage of how the system works. You want to clear the exam, and that's why you want to kind of isolate yourself from everything, and you pass your exam and you become a doctor, and eventually you carry on your journey. Okay, I concede that for someone who is a lower middle class family or a middle class family. But what about people who are capable, who are nourished, who can bring changes to the world, who are already sitting in a position where they can try to drive the intellectual output of the country forward? So I think that even someone who is trying to rise up the ladder, he can keep on working, and one day he may become accomplished right from rising from the ground, and one can contribute to the society at that time. So I think that it's a thought that we take 30 years to earn our bread and butter in society, and then how would we kind of do this? But innovations, groundbreaking ideas, a society that functions well, and everyone at peace would require you to be a thinker which is beyond bread and butter. And eventually your understanding of bread and butter would also improve if you know what bread and butter eventually means, because if you can distinguish between what exactly it means, because many a times, and I'm not saying this to people who actually struggle on the street and have to earn their bread every day. I'm saying this to people who are accomplished. Obviously, I can never say this to people who have to earn their bread every day, but to people who are accomplished, what eventually brings satisfaction and happiness to you, whether it is one car or two cars or four cars or one house or two houses or four houses or whatever it is, that is again a function of our own understanding and diverse knowledge. That what we do, I travel to a lot of ashrams in southern India, and I spend a lot of time in places where I see people more happy and less stressful than I see when I travel in Europe. So I want to learn more that why it happens, and that's why that I can only learn it by exposing myself to these experiences and understanding that why it happens and why someone is feel more fulfilling than someone who has everything in life. So I'm not resisting myself to not learn that, and it is just a fluid mind which is making me curious to understand this, that why it happens. So
Wonderful,
Thank
Dr.
you very much.
Ashish.
thank you.
Yeah.
I think, we have had a very enriched session.
Thank you.
In fact, we've been holding a lot of webinars, and I think this is one of the best webinars.
Thank you.
And thanks to you, Dr. Jaiswal, I think, there's there are a lot of takeaways from this session of yours.
Thank you so
I'm sure our students, our teachers, and our parents, and all of us have benefited a lot from this. And we hope sometime in a couple of months' time, you again join us for another webinar, sir. It'll be our pleasure to have you over. And we will definitely be, at least I will be immediately hunting for Fluid, sir, the book. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting
Thank you.
me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ashish.
Thank you.
Great, profound talk. Really, it inspired my teachers, parents, and students. And I think this is the first session we have got multiple questions and many questions. And
Thank you
some
so
of the
much.
questions we did not answer.
Thank you for inviting me, and I wish everyone all the best, and please stay safe. And I hope you take something out of this talk. And I was delighted. Pleasure was all mine, and I'll be very happy to take questions further also. I mean, you can write to me later on, or in case if you are keen, then I'll be very happy to answer those questions. And all the best for the children, especially to the children.
That is so nice of you. That is so nice of you. Great.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.